Hello, how are you? The Converted Man here. I'm going to be doing a live look at a video because what else is there to do? So, this is Proof God Exists, the God Thesis Part 1. Oh, good, there's more. And I have to shout out, because he's there, in the comment sections, look who I found. King Crocoduck! Yay! Hi, King Crocoduck. You must be as bored as I am. I've been looking for things to talk about, and this is a video I found. And you did too. Yay! Maybe one day he'll be on my channel, or I'll be on his. Maybe one day. Anyways, so yeah, I'm gonna play the video, and yeah, I'm just gonna call Alan here faceless because he's covering his face. Not sure why that is, but okay, sure, whatever, that's fine. So I'll stop the video whenever I have something to say, and yada yada yada. Now I already have something to say without even starting the video. In the description, it says, with the following two leaps of faith / axioms, I can prove God to the atheist heathen once and for all. Now, with a leap of faith, you can pretty much prove, not enough quotes in the universe, anything. Axioms, however, have to be justified. They're extraordinarily complex ideas. Axiom is something that is asserted to be true, and it is true because it can't not be true. It is a starting point for other things like reality is real. That's an axiom. You start with that, and then you move on. And you just go, well, what's the proof that it's true? And you go, well, there really isn't one, or it's a tautology. The definition is what it is. Like, what is a bachelor? It's an unmarried man. So if you're married, you can't, and you're a man, you can't be a bachelor. That's just what the word is. So to show that an axiom is actually an axiom would require a good logical argument, and perhaps even the truth table. Da, da, da. And as I've said before, those aren't that complicated. Anyways, I doubt that we're going to get any logical argument, let alone anything that approximates, some sort of methodology to show that these are axioms. But okay, let's grant benefit of the doubt. Let's try to steel man this guy's position and see what he has. Now, also in the description says, number one, intelligence doesn't need to be stored in a single place. Well, this gets into problems of what you mean by intelligence. There's going to be definitional problems potentially. I don't know what you mean by not in a single place. I don't know, but right. Number two, if there's a being that includes the entire universe and is capable of both performing action and designing new actions to perform in the future, that being can be reasonably called God. Why? What makes those things attributes that you would then call God? This is a problem that's come up over and over again, is what attributes does a thing have to be a God? And anybody can say anything to answer that question. What makes a God is up to the whims of the person claiming that there's a God. And so I find this as an identification problem. I could say this is God. There it is. Not only did I name it God, but also it is actually God. And the attributes that make it God are that it's blue and it's squishy and that it looks like a sheep from Minecraft, and and it doesn't move or doesn't say anything, and that's what makes it God. But why? Well, just because those are the attributes I decided. So, anyways, enough. Let's get to this.
There is a living being that includes the entire universe as part of it and is capable of both performing tasks and making up new tasks that it would like to perform. In short, God, a sentient God, exists, and I'd like to prove it to you in 20 minutes or less. This is the first video in a three-part series about God and religion. Obviously, religion is kind of complicated, and even a full hour isn't really enough to say everything that needs to be said. Also, I'm just one dude. I don't have all the answers. The purpose of each part, this one included, is not to be taken as a be-all, end-all, but rather to explain my thoughts before a series of debates on the topic with the broader skeptic community online. This video series is meant for atheists and agnostics. If you're a Christ culture or the culture of any other religion, I have no time for you right now, though I'm sure I'll make another series for you down the line. Unless the coronavirus kills us all, this one's not for you. This is just for atheists and agnostics. Okay, let's jump in. I have to prove God to you in less than 20 minutes. That's not a lot of time. So we're starting with atoms. They're the smallest unit of normal matter, and literally everything we use on a daily basis is made out of them. It's fair.
Are atoms the smallest thing? I mean, I thought that you got down to like the Planck bit, and that's the smallest. Nah, whatever. It's probably not going to be important.
Fair to say that they exist. Awesome. Cells. Cells also exist. Scientists like to say that they're alive, and that's cool. But what they really are is just a bunch of atoms that are working together. That said, they work together so much that it's reasonable to talk about the cell, again, just a collection of atoms, as a single unit. Cells can make larger things sometimes, either plants or animals. I only have 20 minutes, so we don't really care about plants right now. Let's talk about animals. Specifically, let's take a moment and talk about my favorite animal, me. Humans, which is to say the cells that make us up, are really cool. Our cells are organized in different ways. I want to talk about your heart for a second because you love me and are about to hit like and subscribe. Your heart's job is to pump blood around your body. It's part of the circulatory system. What else is part of the circulatory system? Your veins, your lungs, your kidney, a bunch of stuff. Cool. So let's talk about another part of your body, your hand. It has veins. A single blood cell can be in your veins, in your hand. It's both part of the structure we call your hand and also the system we call your circulatory system. It doesn't have to choose between them, it's in both. It's reasonable to talk about the circulatory system, which is just a collection of cells, and it's also reasonable to talk about the hand, which is just a collection of cells. Cool. One cell is both a hand cell and also a blood cell. Now, let's talk about my second favorite animal after humans, and that's ants. Ants are also really cool, except individual ants are actually kind of stupid. But it doesn't matter that the individual ants are stupid because
Ants are insects, not animals.
they work together, which makes them substantially less stupid. They're the second best builders after us in the history of the world. They're very successful. Why? Well, because of the hive mind, sometimes called swarm intelligence. The hive is a bunch of individual animals, ants, that share knowledge with one another and produce a single collective strategy about what they should do. A lot of people think that the queen is in charge of ant colonies. That's not actually true. Before I say this, I want to be very clear. This is the first thing that maybe not every scientist would agree with. I would like to call the intelligence system of swarm intelligence a quote, decentralized nucleus.
Well, I mean, there's probably going to be a reason why scientists wouldn't agree with that, is because, well, many reasons. Ants use chemicals to guide other ants to locations. Is that a form of intelligence? Yeah, but is it the sort of thing that he's saying it is? No. So, probably why scientists are not going to agree with you.
What I mean by that is that when we talk about a human body, I can point to a single thing, the brain, and say that there's where you hold your smartness, if you will. I can point at a cell and do the exact same thing. There's the nucleus. That's where all the smart stuff happens. Everything else reports at some level to the nucleus to tell it what to do. A decentralized nucleus, like that of a colony, doesn't have a single place where I can point and say, there's the brain of this ant colony. There's not one place that all of the bees get instructions from. Cool. One last jump before we can start talking about God. Let's talk about system science for a sec.
Well, ants do have brains. Like, each ant has a brain. So, when you... This analogy, which is all this is already falling apart, because the various different small bits of your brain that make up the whole and ants are two different things. You'd also have to talk about the brain of the ant itself.
A system scientist looks at the world as a bunch of different, you guessed it, systems. We're going to talk about Earth science specifically. It will eventually become clear why. Science nerds like to break down Earth into 4 basic spheres, kind of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but not quite as cool. There's air. That's called the atmosphere. There's the rocks and minerals. It's called a geosphere. You've got the biosphere, which is all of life and soil. And finally, you've got what the nerds like to call the hydrosphere, which is basically just Katara's water and ice. There's no fire sphere. Screw you, Zuko. I'm sorry, Uncle Iroh. I love you. Okay, so obviously I'm making Earth science way more simple than it actually is. Like your body, everything on Earth is actually part of multiple systems at the same time. Some of those systems are completely included in larger ones. So like within the atmosphere, you've got the troposphere layer, for example, which is the lowest layer, and it's where planes fly. You guessed it, I'm going to talk about the atoms in the cell, in the blood system, in the human, in the plane, which is in the troposphere, in the atmosphere. But I'm also going to talk about the same human being in that biosphere because it's an animal. Specifically, it's in the anthroposphere, which is what we call any part of the environment that is made or modified by humans for use in human activities and human habitat. That it obviously includes the plane. So what this means is that you can be part of multiple spheres at the same time. Very cool. Can we define sentience real quick?
I think your analogy has been completely insane. It's just incoherent. So you live in multiple spheres at the same time. Well, these are just labels that we give things. You do understand that, right? Like, these aren't actual places. And I'm just getting the feeling that this is headed into some sort of metaphysical nonsense of well, you exist in multiple places at the same time, and I don't know. We'll see, I guess. And it's just taking forever. It's just we just get to the point.
So philosophers tend to define it as the capacity to feel, perceive, or experience subjectively. But that doesn't mean shit. Screw philosophers. This old dead French guy named Rene Descartes liked to walk around saying, I think, therefore I am. But that's a load of malarkey. Just because Descartes says he can think doesn't mean that he can actually think. All Descartes was, before he got dead, was a bundle of cells, really just atoms, that over millions of generations of reproduction bastardized into some weird amorphous blob with an ugly accent and attitude towards women. I have no reason to believe that I can think. If you take the science at face value, we as humans are nothing more than a bunch of bastard cells that got together because of an evolutionary accident in transcribing our DNA. You, me, Descartes, all of humanity, we were all an accident. Sorry, facts don't care about your feelings. So I'm going to redefine sentience in a manner that actually means something, unlike the loser Descartes. Sentience, as I'm defining it, means your ability to perform tasks multiplied by your ability to make up new tasks. So I'm going to assume you're watching this on your computer while playing Civ 5, Online Risk, maybe Splix.io in a different tab. It's all good. I get the same ad revenue regardless of whether you keep my tab open, which is to say 0 because I'm not a big enough channel yet. So your computer is very good at performing tasks. It's a heck of a lot better than, say, a mouse. I saw a mouse in my dorm before leaving school yesterday, and it freaked me out. So I'm thinking about mice a lot. Okay, so the mouse is obviously not able to do nearly as much complicated stuff as your computer. But your computer doesn't make decisions like at all. It's just not, it's only able to perform tasks. It doesn't make up new ones really at all, ever. Therefore, a mouse, because you take the multiple of the two, is actually, under my definition, more sentient, more alive, more smart, whatever you want to call it, than your computer is. Awesome. Little did you know, we now have all the building blocks required. I have found the Infinity Stone. Now let's talk about God, you atheist scum. I'm just kidding. I love you. Like and subscribe. Okay, here goes. You
That's
are
kind of
part
funny.
of a colony.
No, I'm not.
Just like ants, there are structures that exist above you, and under the definition that we just gave of sentience, some of those structures are smart. Actually,
Yeah, pretty much what I thought he was going to do is use these labels that we attach to things to then make this analogy into some sort of metaphysical nonsense. So we are part of a hierarchy. Sure, there's people in charge of whatever, on and on and on. You know, I have to pay bills. The reason I have to pay bills is because somebody owns the property, and then they have to pay some bills to somebody else, and yada, yada, yada. So all that's part of a hierarchy. But that's not a colony. They're different things.
some of them are a lot smarter than we are, even me, and I'm a genius. Okay. A city, for example. Now, coronavirus screws everything up, but normally, New York, say, works collectively. It does this in a couple of ways. Yes, it has a government, and that makes laws and has a police force and tries to enforce those laws, blah, 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 blah. But that's not actually the only part of New York that matters. Traffic, for example. So I want to be very clear. I hate cars with a burning passion. I'm sure eventually I'll make a video on that subject. But in the meantime, let's talk about the rules of traffic. Not what's written in law, but what people actually do. In Japan, everyone follows traffic laws. Like, they actually follow them. It's astounding and a little bit totalitarian and freaky. I don't much like it. In Guatemala, the opposite is true. Most of Guatemala doesn't even have traffic lights telling you what to do when you cross an intersection. You just sort of go and hope for the best, with the understanding that you have to let people through sometimes and have to be a bit of aggressive jerk sometimes if you want to get wherever it is that you're going. Even in America, though we're certainly not Guatemala, Tesla, in teaching its driving artificial intelligence to drive safely, has taught it specifically to break the law sometimes, because not doing so, given that everyone else does, is actually unsafe. If everyone else is going 70 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, you're actually not safe going 49 miles an hour. What this represents is a collective decision to treat law in a specific way, to treat our interaction in public a specific way. Really, what I'm describing is just a culture. But the thing is that culture is constantly changing. We're constantly making up new rules. The whole world used to be like Guatemala's traffic system. I don't want to get too nerdy about traffic law, so I'll just link a video from City Beautiful to do it for me. Watch it. Traffic is fascinating. So a city like New York, is it capable of doing stuff as a collective? Yeah, obviously it is. Is it capable of deciding new things that it wants to do? Yes, that too. It's a decentralized nucleus or brain structure, just like ants, but it's very much alive, very much a collection of humans that's reasonable to talk about. Now, of course,
No, your analogy doesn't hold up. Like, I get where you're going. Like, you know, the individual humans and part of this system and working together inside of this rule set can decide. You know, the governing body can decide on an action that the that's then placed into law that then the citizens must follow. And if the law is fair and understood and known, then the citizens will follow it. But that's still nothing like a brain or a colony, for that matter. Your analogy is broken. If that's all this is, which I strongly suspect it is, you don't have any proof of anything, even a little. Just a broken analogy. An appeal to analogy is not an argument, especially when the analogy is not very analogous.
Of course, you may say, yeah, but Milsrow, it's not New York that's doing things. It's a bunch of New Yorkers that are doing things. It's the people, not the city. The thing is, I agree with you, but I don't care. I didn't write the script for this video. I didn't record it. I didn't break my phone, forcing me to use this terrible computer camera to capture the video. I'm sorry. That was all my cells. It wasn't me. It was a bunch of individual cells. I mean, you can make that argument, and in a technical sense, you're right, but I don't care that you're right. It's still a stupid thing to say. Why? Because quite obviously, when we're talking about who made this video, pointing to a specific cell in my body isn't fair. And similarly, if we're talking about, say, traffic culture, or we're talking about how Manhattan has literally grown larger over time because a bunch of people have thrown crap into the ocean because they wanted more land, you can't talk about that reasonably by pointing at a single person.
So essentially, this is kind of a compositional fallacy. The parts are not the whole, just in reverse. The whole is not the parts. So we don't call this whole thing that I call me cell 1 and cell 2, because that just doesn't work. But yes, at a base level, we are just a bunch of energy flying around because we're just made of electrons and subatomic particles that then make up cells that then make, these structures that build upon and build upon. So reducing it just down to its bare basic of what it is, and then you have the label on top of that, doesn't change the reality of what it is. And it seems like you're confusing the parts and the whole and the whole and the parts. Like, well, I don't, it's not me that made this video, it's my cells. Well, those cells working together are still you. So these labels, although somewhat abstract, actually give us an idea of what we're talking about. And what you're saying doesn't fly in terms of analogy or logic or science. So, I mean, yeah, this is really just okay. Well, I mean, you've got about 6 more minutes to go, so maybe you can redeem yourself.
That's just not how it happened. These things happened collectively. Awesome. All the little atheists in my comment section say. So New York is sentient. That's fine. That doesn't mean God exists. Oh, but it does, my friends. Let's talk about companies for a second as well. This is on YouTube. So let's use Google as an example. Is Google capable of making up things it wants to do? Yeah, specifically working alongside the Chinese authoritarian government to spy on people and censor any news that they don't like. Is a task. Can they make up new decisions or tasks that they want to achieve? Yeah, they do that all the time. Is there a centralized nucleus? Well, they have a CEO, just like there's a mayor of New York or a president of the United States, but it's not like those guys are the only ones with power. Are there individual people in Google or in New York that are more or less important? Obviously, there are. There are individual cells within your body that are more or less important, but none of them are a central nucleus of what I will call the superstructure, this thing that's bigger than any of them individually. Awesome. So let's recap. There's an atom. That atom is in a cell. That cell is a blood cell in a human's vein in their hand. So it's both a hand cell and a part of the circulatory system. So it's a blood cell. The human that it's part of is sitting in the troposphere on a plane right now over New York City. It's obviously part of the biosphere because it's a living thing, specifically the anthropomorphosphere because that thing is a living human being. The cell is also part of New York and has to follow the laws that New York has decided on. It's also on a Delta plane, unfortunately, which means that the peanuts are going to be crap because Delta's customer service culture has evolved over the years to be shit. This little atom is part of all those different structures simultaneously. It's kind of a badass, actually. Here's my next claim. And it's actually a claim that scientists have been making for a while now, at least since the 1970s, when chemist James Lovelock and microbiologist Lynn Margulis, I'm butchering her last name and I apologize, worked on the problem, eventually getting the Wollaston Medal in geology for the same basic idea in 2006. I think that Earth is alive and sentient. I think that just as you can look at New York or an individual person or a company or America as a whole, you can also look at Earth. Earth as a whole is capable of doing things, performing tasks, and deciding on new things to do, creating new tasks. If we accept that, surely also, admittedly to a lesser degree, other planets with evidence of life are also capable of performing tasks and making up new ones collectively. While admittedly, it's extremely difficult for a tiny little cell of America, a single human being like me, to figure out what the universe desires. The universe does still desire things. It's performing tasks, it's making new tasks. Yes, that's being done by individual animals across the universe. But again, I don't care. It's happening at a universe-wide level. And so it doesn't matter.
What? The planet's not alive in the sense of what life is. Even using your weird definition of life, it's still not alive. Because and it's interesting, you go from, well, the Earth has to have life on it for it to do things. But then you take Mars and you go, well, it's not doing diddly squat because there's no life on it to make it able to do things. So how do you get to the universe having desires unless every part of the universe is occupied by living creatures? Your cells are well, at least what we know, we've got a bunch here on this planet Earth. Okay, all right, great. And you want to say that's alive? Okay, all right. And then you take Mars and you go, well, that's not alive. That's a dead cell. And you've got all the other planets in our solar system that are dead. You've got the sun itself, which is effectively dead. You've got all these other things. Who knows how many other planets in this that are also dead. So I think that the patient of the universe is filled with mostly dead space. So if that was, analogous to a human, that would be one dead human. Because you have to have life for the planet to decide to do things, which you just said. So you can't then take this analogy of, well, I know there's one planet with life that can do stuff on it, but that's it. That's it for our solar system. And so how does the universe have any desires at all? Because it has this system? No, it doesn't have a system. There's laws of physics, and that's it. There's no desire. There's no anything there. My word, this is incoherent.
That in some cases, certain tasks have a particular author, quote unquote, that is responsible. Those tasks still affect and are done within the constraints of the universe. The universe is therefore orders of magnitude more able than you or me of making up new tasks and carrying them out. The universe is orders of magnitude more sentient than we are.
Incoherent.
Only last point I'd like to make is that perhaps in the case of humans, because we're losers and have barely even made it to the moon, let alone started to expand across the entire universe, perhaps the highest level we can reasonably talk about is the Earth. But I don't think that means the universe doesn't still work together as a group. It just means we're idiots and haven't started interacting with the broader universe yet because everyone refuses to give NASA funding or put Elon Musk in charge. Here's a comparison I'd make. Imagine a tribe of humans living in the Amazon rainforest within Brazil. Now, they've never been in contact with anyone else outside of their tribe, but they're still affected by climate change or by deforestation and the smog that comes with it. They're still protected by the Brazilian army, regardless of whether they know that that army exists. In their everyday life, quite obviously, the highest level of, quote, colony, as I've been calling it, that affects them is just that tribe. No one else exists to them. But the rest of Brazil still affects them in a very real way, regardless of whether they understand how that's happening. The rest of humanity still affects them. Same thing is true of a company. Let's say Amazon just bought Whole Foods. From literally the day after that happens, Whole Foods begins to change fundamentally because of the fact that it's now owned by Amazon. The average customer might not even be aware that Amazon owns it for a while. The average employee might not even care. But over time, Amazon will probably make it more and more a part of the overall system. As that happens, the culture of both Whole Foods and Amazon will change, and the highest level of the day-to-day experience of a Whole Foods worker will no longer be as an employee of the supermarket, but instead as an employee of Amazon as a whole. All right, that's it. God exists. I should be clear. That is a leap of faith. To call it God is a leap of faith. There are two leaps.
To call it anything at all beyond an incoherent analogy is a giant leap of faith. Forget, even if no, what you said makes no sense from start to. It is a broken analogy. That's all it is. So if we agree with your definition from one, and then if we apply it to the universe, but you could also you could, how is the universe? It doesn't. Fire would also be intelligent. I mean, you could apply it to just, you could apply it to computers. You could apply it to just about anything. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. Ironic that I said that. And at least he admits that it's faith. I mean, yeah. But it's not just a leap of faith. It's just nonsense. Okay, we're almost done.
Of faith in this entire argument. There's a leap of faith of saying that a decentralized nucleus is possible, which is to talk about specifically the colony structure, right? Both in the context of ants, but also in the context of humans. And then there's also the leap of faith in saying that once you've defined and I think proven reasonably the existence of this superstructure, this entire universe, as being capable of performing tasks and capable of making up new tasks.
But the universe isn't making up new tasks or perform. What do you even mean by that? This is just another problem of the loose language that you're using here. It's completely, just utterly incoherent to its core. You know, is the universe made the black hole, and then if that gets too close to our solar system, we're pretty screwed. So that's the universe making up the task that it needs to, what, vacuum us away? Or I mean, it's just, all right, almost done.
It is a leap of faith to call that thing that is the universe God. I don't think it's a large leap of faith, but it is a leap of faith, and we should recognize that. If you're curious, drop a comment at the bottom. If you're mad and want to debate me, please do. The whole point of this is to try to spark discussion. Contact me by email or by Twitter, both of which are in the description below. Like and subscribe. I love you all. Thank you. I am so good. That is beneath 18 minutes. 18 minutes, not 20, 18. I'm very good. Don't hold me to this in the future.
I don't know why you put a time limit on yourself or whatever, but at any rate, you didn't produce anything that even begins to resemble a logically coherent argument, let alone produce any empirical evidence or repeatable test. No methodology for this, no anything. It's just an appeal to an analogy. Now, because I'm interested in what King Crocoduck has to say, I'm going to go ahead and read what King Crocoduck has to say. Is there anything in the universe which would not meet the criteria of sentence definition? Because it seems to me that if interpreted in the manner that allows us to designate Earth as sentient, it becomes justified in saying the cells in every individual atom are sentient. Right. Yeah. Basically, what I was saying is that his definition is so loose and so broad that it can be applied to fire. Like the Earth, cells and atoms can perform tasks which I'm interpreting to mean do things. Cells can undergo respiration, cytokinesis, the atoms can undergo bonding, etc. So they can design new tasks the same manner the Earth can, which I'm interpreting to mean that they're responsive to changes in the external environment. If you're fine with absolutely everything in the universe being sentient by definition, then sentient becomes synonymous with existence. Then the premise, all existing things are sentient, thus becomes all existing things exist, which is a tad theology and therefore unserviceable as a premise for any argument for God's existence or, well, anything at all. And if, on the other hand, you want there to be a meaningful distinction between sentient and non-sentient, you have to give example of non-sentient things and show how they can remain such even after you interpret sentience in such a manner that allows Earth to qualify. Wow, good job there, King. Well said. And does he? Let's see. Alan's answer is the sentience exists on a spectrum. Oh God. Blah blah blah. Yeah. Okay. So he doesn't really have a fully formed, coherent answer, and honestly, doesn't have a fully formed, coherent anything. As far as debating this individual goes, I couldn't do that because you don't have a debate at all. There's no syllogism here. Not that that's necessary for a debate, but there's nothing here other than an analogy. Every single individual ant has a brain. So already that this it's this complex structure system, this the neural, maybe they're like the neural pathways or no, and the cities or this thing. No, the Earth is alive. No, it really isn't. Not in the sense that we're alive. I mean, things about. I mean, just the definitions are incoherent, and the argument is a complete and an utter appeal from and to analogy. So there's nothing here. There's no. If the universe is God, why even need the label? Or it can do things. Well, but it can only do things that it's constrained by the laws of the universe itself. And also that would mean that God was like a single particle at one point in time, then expanded into the universe. Like, so when at the T1 point, was it still God? Like, and then before that, even though before isn't really a concept, what was God then? There's just, I think that it's just this kind of, I'm gonna grab at this and grab at that and try to do a thing, and I don't recognize this as any sort of anything. If you want to call the universe God, I mean, okay, then this is God, and whatever. How is this not alive? Because it can't make new things. Like, what is that even? The definitions are just, you need an actual argument before I could actually debate you. So I won't be doing that. But did it spark a discussion? Well, yeah. Looking at your video in the comments, you got some people talking, and they all just are pretty much saying that you're not making a lot of sense, and I'm gonna have to read through those comments later. Yeah, this is an argument for mysticism. Yeah, I mean, it's not even that. It's just like, well, the parts are the whole, and the whole are the parts, and if I extrapolate this metaphysical thing into this way, then I can look at it this way, and then I can call it God. Yeah, I guess, but why? Why bother calling it God? if it's just the universe and that's just the way things are, God doesn't know what it's doing because the universe doesn't have any intentionality behind it. The only reason that a city can do anything is because of the humans inside of it. And the only reason that the ant colony can do anything is because of the ants inside of that. So the only reason the universe can do anything is because what? The planets? But is it only the planets that have life on them? How does any of this work? I don't think we'll have any answers. Maybe he'll see this and make a syllogism for his argument. But here's the ultimate thing. You cannot prove something without some methodology. You're going to need empirical evidence, a repeatable test, or a valid and sound argument. One of those things. If you have an idea for another way to prove things, then you're going to have to explain how that works and demonstrate that it works. And you don't have any of those three. You don't have those things. And for some reason, my mouth decided to not work for a moment there. So, come up with an actual argument, and then we'll debate. Hopefully, though, this was a thing that you were interested in watching, because what else is there to do? Wash your hands. Try not to touch your face, even though I did that several times in this video. I've just given up. I just, whatever. Thanks for watching. Remember, lobsters.